You have felt it your entire life, a quiet, persistent sense that you are fundamentally different from the people around you. Not better, not worse, just different. You watch others move easily through small talk, trends, group enthusiasm. You can participate, even perform it well, but internally there is distance, a pane of glass between you and the moment. For years, you may have labeled this anxiety, depression, social defect. But what if it is none of those? What if it is psychological divergence? Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, devoted much of his work to individuals who could not fully adapt to the collective mind. He did not see them as superior, he saw them as burdened with a different task. He called that task individuation. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is not confidence. It is not becoming impressive. It is the painful process of becoming whole. If you recognize yourself in what follows, understand this. Your isolation may not be a defect. It may be a demand placed on you by your own psyche. Before we examine the signs, we must understand the environment. Jung observed that most people live in what he called unconscious participation. They inherit values, beliefs, and fears from the collective without examining them. This is not stupidity, it is efficiency. Society depends on shared assumptions to function. But some individuals cannot remain unconscious for long. They begin to question. They sense contradictions. They notice the shadow beneath the surface. This does not make them enlightened. It makes them uncomfortable. The rare personality is not rare because it is glamorous. It is rare because the psychological cost of self-awareness is high. Many people turn back when they feel that cost. If you have not turned back, you may recognize these signs. Sign 1. The burden of the shadow. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Most people maintain a workable illusion of their own goodness. When they act selfishly, they rationalize it. When they feel envy or cruelty, they project it outward. But you struggle to do that. You are acutely aware of your own capacity for manipulation, aggression, resentment. You do not pretend you are harmless. This awareness is heavy. You understand that morality is not the absence of darkness. It is the discipline required to manage it. Because you have confronted your shadow, you are slower to judge. You recognize how easily circumstances can distort behavior. You know what pressure can do to a human being. This does not make you cynical. It makes you serious. You do not virtue signal easily because you know how often virtue hides compensation. You do not get easily shocked by human behavior because you understand the forces beneath it. The average person lives in a well-decorated house with a locked basement. You open the basement door, and once you see what is there, you cannot unsee it. Sign 2. Distance from the collective. Human beings are wired for belonging. The collective offers safety, shared beliefs reduce anxiety. But you often feel uneasy when consensus becomes intense, when everyone agrees too quickly, politically, socially, culturally. Something in you steps back. This is not contrarianism for attention, it is perceptual independence. Jung warned that the mass mind can overpower individual reflection. When individuals dissolve into the group, critical thinking weakens. History has demonstrated this repeatedly, from authoritarian movements to financial bubbles, where collective emotion overrides reason. You sense this dynamic early. You have likely walked away from groups, ideologies, or environments when they began demanding unquestioned loyalty. You may have been called aloof, difficult, detached. In reality, you are protecting psychological sovereignty. The cost is loneliness. To remain an individual inside a crowd requires constant inner anchoring. You cannot merge fully. A part of you is always observing. This is not superiority, it is responsibility. Sign 3. Pattern recognition and intuition. Jung described intuition as a function of the unconscious that perceives possibilities and trajectories rather than surface details. You often sense where things are heading before others do. You detect subtle inconsistencies in tone. You feel the direction of a relationship early. You notice patterns in systems, social, economic, psychological. To you, the present moment is rarely isolated. It feels like a seed already containing its outcome. This makes you difficult to deceive. You listen not only to words but to subtext. However, this ability carries a cost. Because you see potential endings, you may hesitate to begin. You struggle with enthusiasm for things whose trajectory you already doubt. Others may misinterpret this as negativity. In reality, you are operating on pattern recognition rather than impulse. In older societies, individuals with this orientation often held advisory roles, shamans, strategists, seers, not because they were mystical, but because they were attuned to underlying movement. In the modern world, that sensitivity often goes unrecognized, so you learn to stay quiet, and then occasionally you are proven right. Sign 4. Holding the tension of opposites. The average mind seeks resolution through simplification. Good or bad, right or wrong, ally or enemy. Jung believed psychological maturity required the capacity to hold opposing truths without collapsing into one. You experience this tension constantly. You can see both the victim and the perpetrator in the same person. You can criticize an institution while acknowledging its necessity. You can feel anger and compassion simultaneously. This is exhausting. It takes energy to resist the comfort of binary thinking, but it also grants nuance. While public discourse polarizes, you resist being absorbed into extremes. You recognize complexity where others see slogans. F. Scott Fitzgerald once wrote that the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still function. You function there, not because it is pleasant, but because it feels honest. Sign 5. Depth over surface. Small talk is not immoral. It serves social bonding. But for you, prolonged superficiality feels draining. You are drawn to questions of meaning, mortality, power, consciousness. You want to understand what motivates people at their core. This intensity can make you appear serious or intimidating. You may have fewer relationships, but they tend to be deep. Jung observed that as individuals individuate, relationships sometimes fall away, not out of contempt, but because psychological alignment changes. You would rather share silence with someone who understands you than noise with someone who does not. This preference narrows your circle, but it clarifies it. Sign 6. The crisis of meaning. Many people structure their lives around stability, career, family, routine. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. But if your life lacks inner significance, you feel restless, even ill. Jung noted that neurosis often arises when a person lives against the demands of their deeper nature. Your dissatisfaction is not always chemical. Sometimes it is existential. If your work feels empty, if your path feels borrowed, your energy collapses. You cannot sustain a life that lacks meaning. This makes you volatile to the status quo. You may leave secure positions. You may dismantle structures that look successful from the outside, not because you crave chaos, because your psyche refuses stagnation. This is dangerous if unconscious. But when understood, it becomes guidance. Your hunger for meaning is not pathology, it is orientation. Sign 7. Synchronicity and inner alignment. Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, events connected not by direct cause but by significance. He did not frame this as magic. He described it as a causal connecting principle between psyche and matter. You may notice moments where inner states and outer events align in improbable ways. A thought coincides with a meeting. A symbol from a dream appears externally. Where others dismiss these as random, you experience them as psychologically meaningful. This does not mean the universe revolves around you. It means you are attentive to pattern. When you are aligned with your deeper direction, life feels fluid. When you are misaligned, friction increases. Over time, you begin to trust that internal compass more than external approval. This is not irrationality. It is cultivated intuition. If you recognized yourself in these signs, you're probably tired. Self-awareness is heavy. Independence isolates, meaning demands. But understand this: individuation isn't rising above humanity. It's becoming responsible within it. Once you realize you're different, the temptation is arrogance, withdrawal, quiet contempt. Choose that path and you stagnate. The final stage is return. You face your shadow, then act ethically. You step back from the crowd, then re-engage without dissolving. You search for meaning, then build something that carries it. Art, structure, leadership, philosophy, family, innovation. Your task isn't escape, it's contribution through clarity. When reflection disappears and emotion rules, those who can think independently become safeguards. Not saviors, safeguards. You aren't rare because you're superior. You're rare because few endure the tension of honest self-examination. So stop shrinking yourself into comfort. Discipline yourself into usefulness. Integrate your shadow. Protect your independence. Channel your depth into creation. And stay humble. The moment you believe you're awake while others sleep, you've fallen unconscious again. If this spoke to you, you already know. You're not broken, you're becoming, and becoming is never easy. If even one sign hit you, don't disappear silently. Comment the number and why. I read them. And if this gave words to something you've carried for years, leave a like. It helps this reach others still questioning who they are.